In our top story this hour, fighting in the Ukrainian city of Bakhmut is escalating with another push by Russian forces to break through Ukrainian defense lines that have largely held firm for the past 6 months. Just west of Bakhmut, shelling and missile strikes hit the Ukrainian-held city of Kostyantchivka, damaging multiple homes and injuring civilians. Police said Russian forces attacked the town with S-300 missiles and cluster bombs. Our chief correspondent Cookson has this report.
Ukrainian firefighters in the Donetsk region are being overwhelmed by recent Russian attacks on towns near Bakhmut. Barrages of cluster bombs carried by missiles have set multiple houses on fire. This was a neighborhood in Kostyantchivka, prompting a fraught response by firefighters who had to duck and cover when fresh barrages rained down. This Ukrainian soldier says, as you can see, they're using cluster bombs prohibited under international law. They're shooting at peaceful civilians, he said, private houses. These are not military targets. An ambulance racing near the besieged city of Bakhmut. An elderly woman, one of several hundred civilians who've chosen to stay, gets medical care. A paramedic shouts, "Don't close your eyes, don't be silent, hold my hand," he says. "Everything is going to be fine." Hospitals are still operating but are overwhelmed. So far they have enough medical supplies, but it's touch and go. In muddy fields and dugouts near Bakhmut, the Ukrainian fight bank has been fraught with problems. The Russian military is throwing its might at taking the city in a battle that's been raging 7 months. Cookson, Arise News.
And Cookson joins us now from London for more. John, good to have you on Newsday. What's the latest you're hearing about the situation in and around Bakhmut?
Well, as you can see from those images there, it's pretty hellish. I mean, my goodness me, what people must be going through there. There are about 1,000 civilians still left in Bakhmut, and we saw 1 or 2 of them being rushed to hospital there. I mean, it just beggars belief that this can be happening at the present day as Russia continues its assault to try to take the city. Reference there to them using cluster bombs, and they are indeed outlawed under international law. But not every country has signed up to the convention not to use them, including Russia and including America, just out of interest. The US is not a signatory to that treaty. The horror of cluster bombs, and I've experienced them myself during the Bosnian War, is the bomb explodes above the ground and then sends out thousands of bomblets, like grenades in all directions. They're absolutely lethal for civilians, and not all of them explode. And this is the other danger of cluster bombs. These bomblets land in a house or in a field or something like that, and a child will pick them up and they explode. I mean, they are really a horrendous weapon. Apparently being used in Bakhmut at the moment. Hundreds of soldiers, Russian and Ukrainian, have died in the last 24 hours. The Ukrainians claim 1,000 Russian soldiers are dead. The Russians claim 220 Ukrainians. We'll have to take those figures with some skepticism because there's no real confirmation on either side as to the numbers, but it's clearly a large number of soldiers from both sides are dying in this particular conflict.
Absolutely tragic. And as this war escalates, there are reports the Chinese leader Xi Jinping may visit Moscow soon. Now, what can we make of this development?
This is a big story. I mean, Putin hasn't got many pals in the world, but one of them is Xi Jinping, who's just been re-elected for an unprecedented 3rd term as leader of China. He's been talking today, and no doubt you'll hear about it later in the bulletin, about building a great wall of steel when reinforcing China's military. Now, if China and Russia get together on the battlefield against Ukraine and who knows who else, then that is a conflict of mega proportions that no one wants to see. On the other hand, President Xi also sees himself as a global peacemaker. He wants to burnish his image. The Chinese do have a peace deal on the table to settle this conflict in Ukraine. And although China announced that President Xi was going to Russia soon, that was thought to be next year. Now it could be next week. So that's very, very important. What is Xi going to meet with Putin about? What are they going to talk about? And also, we understand that President Xi will have a video conference with President Zelensky of Ukraine after that meeting. So this is a real big story, but we're still waiting for confirmation that Xi will visit Moscow next week.
Well, thank you, John. The Black Sea grain deal runs out on the 19th. Can the Geneva meeting today rescue the initiative?
I think so. Just to remind ourselves, the Black Sea grain deal was agreed between Russia, the UN, Turkey, and Ukraine back in July. It was renewed for 120 days. It was renewed for another 120 days. And as you say, runs out in a few days. Now, Russia saying it's not going to renew its deal unless it can get some movement on the lifting of sanctions which are preventing Moscow exporting certain agricultural products. And really, Russia has backed the UN into a bit of a corner here. And I think the world community is going to have to relent on this, because if there is no deal extended next week, then millions and millions of tons of grain is going to be still stranded in the Black Sea and Black Sea ports, and will not get to the countries that desperately need it. And I include in this those countries in East Africa. Nigeria takes so much of this grain every year. It really is a serious situation if this grain deal cannot be renewed. As I say, the UN, I think, is going to act as a decent broker here. And I'm reasonably confident there will be some kind of breakthrough before the 19th.
Right, and while we're talking the impact of this war on trade, British intelligence says the Kremlin is protecting Russia's wealthiest big cities and social elites, from the impact of the war. So just over a year later, can we say that economic sanctions are failing to impact Russia with regards to, trying to tame them with regards to this war?
Yeah. There's some truth in that. I mean, Russia will say that, and I mean, you go to Moscow and the supermarkets are full, and there's all the trappings of sort of Western culture there, and there are Russian versions of Kentucky Fried Chicken and McDonald's, and Russia, frankly, has coped reasonably well so far, generally speaking, and it's not surprising because the world is littered. The history is littered with sanctions failing, going back decades now, because there will always be countries in the world that will trade with the country that's being targeted, in this case, Russia. And Russia, as I said earlier, has a massive market in China, in India, Pakistan, South Africa, and all these countries are still trading perfectly well with Russia. So Western sanctions have hit the oligarchs hard, but there's always a way around it. They somehow find a way around sanctions, as people have done through the centuries.
Thank you, John. Well, I know it's a few months away, but the Kremlin is not ruling out Putin attending the G20 summit come September. Could you touch on that a little bit?
Yes. I can't see it, although a lot can happen between now and then. He wasn't invited to the last gathering, but things seem to be a little bit fluid at the moment as far as the conflict is concerned. And if there can be some kind of breakthrough, some kind of ceasefire, something like that, then I can see Putin being able to attend. At the moment, I would have thought not.
All right, John Cookson, our RISE chief correspondent, thank you so much for your insight, as always.